hide my tractor duvet. I've got tractors on it today. I realise I'm more makeup than I usually am in my videos. Usually I wake up and we film. That's because I'm going out literally straight after this, so I was just like, I'm gonna film a video because I haven't filmed one yet for this week. I was watching someone's YouTube video the other day and they were like, I really want to start crocheting, but I don't know where to start. I would not have any idea how to start. And I thought to myself, I've made similar videos to this before, but I feel like I can better make one now and share how to actually start to learn crochet and how to learn the basics, and then from there you can adapt and improve your skills. So without further ado, I say we get straight into the video. There are so many routes you can go down. You can go down blanket making, you can go into clothes making, you can do homeware, anything in between. One second, I'm gonna close the window because I feel like I'm being listened to and that like freaks me out. I personally prefer to make clothes because like I make clothes anyway. I made this top. I know. Blankets and homeware is definitely the easier way to start, is the easier path to start with, but honestly there are some tops that are so simple that it makes no difference really. So there are several things that you need to know to start to learn to crochet. You need to know different yarn types, you need to know different yarn weights, the crochet hook sizes that correlate with the yarn weight, and different types of stitches. Yarn can be made up of different things. So a yarn like this is the Starcraft Special Double Knit. This is kind of like your basic wool that you would start making projects with, is 100% acrylic. So when you're wearing it, it gets very hot, quite sweaty, but also maybe not the best for the environment. There are obviously some very eco options, but so I kind of try to go for an in-between. Affordable, feels nice, isn't 100% acrylic. So this is 60% cotton, 40% acrylic, and this is my favourite. This wool I literally use for everything. I love it so much. I figured that making my own clothes from this is better than buying entirely acrylic pieces from fast fashion. So this is the Serdar Stories Double Knit. I love Serdar, especially the stories. I use stories for everything. This is in the colour Dreamers, but I just thought that's such a cute colour. The composition of the yarn definitely changes the feel of your garment or whatever you're making, and you kind of have to play around with this to figure out what you like. Go into a yarn shop, feel the difference, and they always have the composition written on the back. So like here it will say 100% acrylic. The next thing that you need to know about is different weights of yarn. There are multiple weights, but the basics are 4-ply, double knit, Aran, chunky, and super chunky. The thicker wool you have, the quicker it will be to make up projects, and the thicker and larger your projects will be. So if you made it with super chunky, obviously it would knit up really quickly. If you made it with 4-ply, it would take you probably about a year. No, I avoid 4-ply because it does take so long, but I did make myself some leg warmers with 4-ply. But I'm impatient, but if you have the patience, 4-ply can create some really nice effects as well. The different weights use different size hooks. You can obviously use any size hook with different weights. The larger hook you use, the bigger the stitches will be. So if you're using a very thin yarn and a big hook, your stitches are going to be massive. A thicker yarn and a very thin hook, your stitches will be very tight. On your balls of wool, there will be usually a indication to what size hook you need for the different types of wools. So for instance, double knit is usually a 4mm or 5mm hook. These are websites that you can buy yarn from, but I do think that going into a yarn shop and picking out your wool and speaking to the people that work there is the best way to learn and figure out what is going to be best for your project and what is going to feel nicest in your garment or whatever you're making. I'm very biased on this because I did work in a yarn shop for a while and I just loved the conversations with people. That was how I learned everything I know, was just talking to people, like older people. Once you know the basic stitches, you can kind of play around, learn new stitches, and it's very simple to expand your knowledge from that. Something very important that I do want to mention is that my lens is dirty. Absolutely not. Something important that I want to mention, because I got very confused initially and I still am confused to this day because I don't know which stitches are the American version, which stitches are the UK version. Basically, particular stitches in the US, for example, double crochet is not the same for UK patterns. This is so easy to solve. It can get a bit confusing if you're like your head's wrapped up in it, but basically just look for a conversion chart. The stitches are exactly the same, they just have slightly different names, which can get a bit confusing. But if you're watching a tutorial, usually they'll show you how to stitch anyway, and if they don't, it should indicate somewhere whether they're using US or UK. But that is something that has thrown me off whilst learning to crochet. So stitches that are really good to learn to start with are a single crochet, a double crochet, and a treble. These are kind of like your basic stitches that you can expand from. Once you know those three, it's kind of like you can kind of do anything because it's just adapting those stitches slightly to learn new ones. I will put tutorials down below for each of those stitches. Beginner projects that are really good, if you're going blanket wise, you can do a granny square blanket. A granny square is basically a little crochet square that is usually repeated over and over. There are so many different types of granny square that you can make loads of stuff just by knowing how to make a granny square. And people usually make blankets from them. You can make things like jackets from them. There's loads of options. I'll put some tutorials for granny squares in the description as well, because I think granny squares are a really good thing to start with, because it's a small project that you can then expand into a larger project if you feel like it. Another thing that is really handy to learn initially is a magic circle. Magic circles confuse me for ages. They are simple once you've got them, but getting your head around it initially is kind of like a bit of a brain fuck. I will leave a video of how to do that in the description, but also magic circles are so useful for granny squares. Sometimes granny squares start off with a magic circle, and then other projects as well. A lot start with a magic circle. So if you can do a granny square and you can do a magic circle, you are basically set. A magic circle is basically crocheting into a circle so that you are working outwards in kind of like a spiral motion rather than in straight lines. Also, I ignore the amount of white paint on my arm. I was painting the stairs and I am covered and I can't get it off. I'm going to insert some beginner friendly tutorials and stuff here, just so that you can kind of get started, and some projects that you can get started with if you are an absolute beginner at crochet. This next section is places to find patterns. Finding patterns is so easy. There are so many out there, so many different platforms you can look on. I refuse to pay for patterns because by the time you bought the wool, it's kind of getting a bit pricey, and it's like, I just don't want that added expense. So I either make up my own pattern, which is not beginner friendly, so I'm gonna forget I said that, or I use these particular websites. Places that are really, really good for beginner tutorials, free tutorials. YouTube is excellent for free patterns. Also, if you find the correct tutorial, there are some really in-depth videos that you can follow. TikTok also is really good. It's usually less descriptive because it's much quicker, but if you know the basics, TikTok often has quite a lot of free patterns. Also, if you search up free patterns, a lot will come up. But if you're happy to pay, finding stuff on Pinterest, usually there is an Etsy pattern linked in the pin. Finding crochet influencers, I want to say, that make tutorials also really helps, because then you've got like a load of free patterns that you know are going to be free, and if you find someone you like, there are loads of free ones. I've kind of put together a little list of people who I follow that do really good free patterns. Chenda DIY has the most option. All her tutorials are free. On YouTube, I will link all of these people below as well, but she makes really cute stuff that you'd probably see on Pinterest. It's really well explained and like explained in such detail that you could probably make anything. Even if you're a beginner, it would be hard, but you could do it. Jenna Phipps, she doesn't necessarily make tutorials, but I find her stuff really interesting to watch because she's kind of like me, she kind of wings it as she goes along. So there's that if you're wanting a little bit of inspiration. Olivia Tully, I talk about her so much because I love her pattern. I've made a couple and I'm planning on making a few more, but her work is stunning. It's really Pinteresty, and it also doesn't look handmade, like in a good way, as in like it's so good and interesting that it doesn't look like you made it yourself. She makes really summery, beachy patterns, and I just really like the stuff she makes. So she's on YouTube as well as TikTok and Instagram, but her tutorials are mainly on YouTube. And last but not least is this, I I cannot remember their name, I'm really sorry, but I'll put it on the screen. Like Olivia, actually they make very similar things to Olivia. If you have any suggestions for other people to follow, put them in the description. I also have made a few tutorials myself. So that is kind of my beginner's guide to how to start crocheting or how to start learning to crochet. Make sure if you have any questions, ask me in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you want to see and I will see you in next week's video.